How do sperm cells fight each other effectively?
Ah, okay. So this is actually very interesting. So the question was, how do sperm cells fight? And it depends on the species. So in mammals, for example, in humans, the sperm look like a cannonball, and they swim, and it's kind of who swims faster. But there's definitely a selection that goes on in the female reproductive tract, because many sperm begin, only a few get to the end, and we don't know very much about what happens, but it doesn't seem to be a random selection of the ones that get to the end. But in many species, there's actually sort of pushing and shoving going on. So, for example, in some worms, the sperm, they crawl. They're more like amoebas, and they crawl, and they kind of push each other out of the way. And also, the other thing is that males in many species have evolved ways to disable or neutralize or remove the sperm of anybody who might have made it before. And so for example, I mean, you sort of think, well, I mean, a penis is supposed to be just for delivering sperm, but actually in many species, a penis has all kinds of spikes and ridges and sort of suction cups and sort of strange ornaments. And many of these seem to be involved in either stimulating the female so she takes up more of your sperm, or in removing, or both, the sperm of previous males. So there is actually quite a lot that goes on so that for males to try and be more successful in sperm competition.
The paper this week, actually they can poison each other or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes there are poisonous substances as well.
Thank you for your very interesting lecture. And if I understood correctly, you said that the bacterial life is responsible on Earth for the mineral diversity of rocks?
Mm-hmm.
It seems so.
It seems to be. At least not only microbes, but mostly microbes. Yes.
Mostly.
I mean, they can, for example, microbes. So much of the world's gold is produced by geology, but some microbes can pull gold ions out of solutions. So if you have gold chloride, for example, the right bacteria will make gold metal for you. And so yes, many minerals are the direct or indirect result of the action of life.
So does it mean that analyzing mineral diversity on Mars, of the Mars rocks, it could be possible to deduce if there has been life on Mars?
It might be, yes, it might well be. I mean, certainly the rocks of meteorites are much simpler than the rocks of Earth. I mean, they contain about 250 minerals. I don't know if anyone's looked at the Martian rocks, so it's an interesting question. I will try and find out.
Hi, thank you for your very nice conference. In my opinion, it has been one of the best.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your insight. And my question is it relies on our Darwinian perspective today, and I would like to assume a provocative point of view, because before Darwin, we always thought that man was special, and then we found it is not, and we somehow still think that Earth is the only planet that have these endless forms most beautiful, and we may be quite wrong, right? And I'm picking up your example of the independent origin of the mutations that made possible for us to drink milk throughout life that you picked, and my question was, are we prepared to detect life in other planets, since we are always assuming that life in other planets must be as we used to think it is, depending on water or in between some range of temperatures, but it may be not, right? So I would like to ask this question in the point to extend the Darwinian perspective, so as to say that life may have been independently arising, if you know what I mean, and so it must not rely on DNA or on water, and in some way we may not be ready to detect life on the other planets.
It's a very interesting question. I mean, one of the arguments that James Lovelock has made, he's the guy who thought of the Gaia hypothesis, that the whole of the biosphere is a self-regulating entity, almost that the whole planet can be thought of as an organism. He argues that you could detect life by looking at the atmospheres of other planets, because an atmosphere where life is going on will be different from the atmosphere of a planet where there is no life going on. So far, and I think he's right, so far we haven't found any of those planets, but then we also haven't found very many other planets outside our solar system. It's a very interesting question, though, I mean, to sort of speculate about we imagine that there must be some kind of genetic material, but we don't know what it would be like. And, we certainly know that there are certainly other components to DNA and RNA. It's true, however, that basic amino acids are found in comets. And so it's quite likely that other life might use amino acids, although whether they'd use ones that we use, I think is unlikely. I mean, I think that it is an area that can only get more interesting. And hopefully I agree with you that hopefully we will become more humble about what we might be looking for.
Let me just say one thing. One of the problems of that is for us, firstly, to define what really life is. It's one of the big problems, right? And
Well, I think there are interesting questions about whether we'd expect to see multicellular life anywhere. I mean, I think that it's multicellular life is very recent in the history of the Earth. I mean, it's about 500 million years old, a little bit older than that, and so. The beginning of animals anyway. And so when you look around, we're basically a sideshow. We like to think that we're the main thing, but actually the microbes are the main thing, and we're the sideshow. But it would be interesting it'd be very interesting to discover, big life, so to speak, on something else, or even any life.
Tenho uma curiosidade. Existe hermafrodismo. Nos humanos é possível autorreproduzirem-se ou com a evolução, infelizmente, ou desgraçadamente, virem-se autorreproduzir? Acho que é uma questão
Well, the question is about hermaphrodites. If in humans it's possible for humans to reproduce itself, I guess.
So hermaphrodites in other species where you have, so in humans, people who are called hermaphrodites are people who have partial genitalia of both sexes, sometimes complete genitalia of both sexes. But usually at least some of the genitalia don't work. Hermaphrodites in the rest of nature fall into two groups. There are those that can self-fertilize and those that can't. And actually not being able to is much more common than you'd expect. I sort of thought initially, well, the whole point of being a hermaphrodite is that you can self-fertilize. But it actually turns out that many of them can't. And what seems to be more the point of being a hermaphrodite is that any member of the species is a potential mate. And so hermaphroditism is especially common in species where encounter rates are low. So, for example, you are not very likely to meet anybody, in which case hermaphroditism is often an advantage because it means that when you meet somebody, if you both like each other, you can proceed. And it's actually one of the very understudied areas in the evolution of sex, because hermaphroditism rituals for seduction are extraordinarily varied, and we don't understand why. There are all sorts of, so for example, if you're a hermaphrodite, you could have sex both at the same time, or you could take it in turns playing roles. And some organisms do both at the same time, and some organisms take it in turns. Sometimes it's extremely lengthy, and sometimes it's more like, there's a species of worm where they have a flatworm, where they have something called penis fencing, where each of them is attempting to fertilize the other one and not be fertilized themselves, and they sort of move back and forth, and then one of them makes a jab, and then that's it. And so the variation is enormous, and in plants even more so. And we really don't know why.
Nos humanos não há conhecimento de qualquer caso que...
Well, in humans,
I've never heard of an accident. But you know, strange things happen.
Isto parece num introdutor do livro e na infância havia várias histórias nesse sentido. Penso que era um pouco também do folclore.
provavelmente, sim. Não há...
Pronto, estou esclarecido. Obrigado.
I may add also, I mean, in plants, most plants are actually hermaphrodites, but it turns out that the evolutionary trend was actually to develop or to evolve mechanisms to prevent self-fertilization. So that's the evolutionary trend. Although, I mean, for a plant, because it doesn't move again, it's a good thing to be an hermaphrodite so that the pollen can self-fertilize the same pollen. Any more questions? Here?